JSON web tokens. Basically JSON that is compact and encrypted and contains some information which is traditionally used for authentication. But the thing is, JWT tokens can be implemented in a lot of different ways. So in this video, I'll be showing you, in fact, in two ways how to implement it. So one will be purely through the backend, and the other, which is through cookies, and the other method, which I've seen a lot more, is through send actually through JSON and then setting it in the local storage in the front end. But that is for later. First, let me start off by showing you what you'll be learning towards the end. So right now I have Firefox. This is the network tab, and I have storage. So in the storage you can see cookies, and this is the first method which I'll be showing you. So this is the network tab again. I've already created a user called test, the username and password. I log in. You can see we've hit a login endpoint, and we've got the tweets for that user. So the more interesting part is actually this cookies. Now we've set the access token here and the refresh token as well. So this is the first method, which is entirely through the backend. So the front end has nothing to do with it. Through the backend, we actually put in the cookies, which I'll be explaining later on, and we'll also be learning how to refresh or regenerate the access token once it has expired. So just for the sake of this video, what I've done is I've actually set the access token to expire in 20 seconds. So after 20 seconds, it should expire. And now if I refresh, it should regenerate the tokens for me. So I'll just refresh the page, and you can see it's regenerated, or rather it's refresh the token, and again we have a new access token in the storage. So if I go to storage and go here, so this is a new access token. So this is what I'll be showing you. If you have noticed, we actually refreshed the access token without redirecting the user back to the login page or having some kind of pop-up. Everything was done in a seamless way, and I'll show you how I did that. So without further ado, let's start off by explaining what JWT is. So JWT, again, like I stated earlier, it's just a JSON which is compact and encrypted and contains information. So JWT token consists of three parts, which is the header, the payload, and the verify signature. So the header contains the algorithm. You can see there are a bunch of different algorithms here, and the type, it says the type, which is JWT, and the payload, which is the information it contains, and some kind of secret key that changes the JWT. So that's basically the gist of what JWT is. You can read more about it. I won't go more in depth. So now let's go to the code and see what we are working with. In our VS Code right here, I've got a Express code base and a Next.js code base. I've also got two instances of terminal running. One is the Next.js server, and the other one is the Express server. And I'm also in my secure cookies branch, because I wanted to share you two methods of how you would do this. One is through cookies and the other one is through the JSON. So I'm in the secure cookies. So if you want the code, it's in this branch right here, F secure cookies, which is the first method, and the second method is in the main branch. So let me start off with the Express backend. So let's go in the package.json and show you some packages that are specific for this JWT. So one is the cookie parser, because we'll be using cookies, and for Express to actually decipher what that cookie is, we need to install this package. Then we need JSON web tokens, which is again used to generate those JWT tokens and verify it. Then we'll be using sequelize, which is for the ORM. So let's hop on to the index.ts, which is again the main, from where our Express server starts. So again, everything here is generic. We have course specified here, and also credentials, as we'll be passing some cookies. We have to mention this credentials true. We'll be using JSON cookie parser, and I'm also using Morgan for those API endpoints. So whenever we make an API endpoint, we get this right here. So that's Morgan. Then we create a route, base URL API v1. We have router, which contains 1 2 3 4 different routes and controllers for each of those routes. Then this is something that I've recently started doing, which is having a middleware that handles all the errors. So I've also linked the video from where I learned this from, so do check his video out, it's phenomenal. And also like his video. So let me just give you a gist of what I'm doing here. So if I step into that middleware function, so these are this is there in the error middleware.ts file under the middleware folder. So if an API hits which does not exist, we create an error, we send a message, and also we give a status code of 404 and pass it to the next function. And this is where all the errors are handled. So let me go to one of my controllers. So let's say login controller. So in the try block, if there is no name or password, instead of saying res.status.message and giving a status code there, what I do is here I throw a error with a status and a message. And since this is in a try block, what happens is it goes to the catch block and it goes to this next function and it passes the error here. And all the error which are thrown comes back to this next function and it is handled there. So if there is a status code, we send a status code and we send a message as well, which is thrown in that error. So that's what is happening. Again, just follow this video, it's very short. He goes much more in depth on that. So the next is again DB connection. So if I step into that, we create a sequelize and we pass in all the configurations, and all the configuration are in the constants file. And I'm not using any database like Postgres or SQL. Everything is done locally here, top secret. Basically all the data is stored here locally itself. Yeah, so DB connection, again we are connecting our sequelize, we are disconnecting whenever this function is called, which is right here. Okay, so that's it for the initial configuration. Now let's actually talk about how I did the JWT configurations. So that all of that is right in here. So the first step, if you're actually following along, is this signup controller, because we need to create the user. So in order to do that, that logic is in this signup controller, which basically gets the name password from the body. If it's not there, again we throw an error. If it exists, we create it using our ORM user model. Okay, I haven't talked about this as also. So this is just basically the user model. So because I'm using TypeScript, this is the way you do it. You could also do it in plain JS, but this is how you do it in TypeScript. We have a user model with ID, name, and password, and this is automatically generated, the ID. So let me go back now. Yeah, so where's the sign up control? Yeah, so here once it's created, we give a status code of 201 and a JSON saying user created successfully. If not, we give an error. So that's basically it, very straightforward, nothing much going here. So now is the more complex part of this video, which is the login controller. So again, we get the name, password from the body. If it's not there, we throw an error, and if it passes that, we find the user. So find one with the name. Again, in a production environment, you would do this with ID, but I just want to show you the JWT part. So yeah, so again, if you're using for your project, make sure it's through ID, not through name. Yeah, so if this user does not exist, we throw an error, again 401 user not found. And if the password does not match, we throw an error with these status code and messages. Okay, so now to the interesting part. So the first part is to actually create that access token. So that logic is, I've encapsulated that logic in this function called generate access token, which takes in that user object, which is this, which we find. So if I step into that, this generate access token, and I've encapsulated this in a function because I'll be using it over and over again. So generate access token, this is in the helpers Let me go to helpers index.ts right here, and okay, I've commented this out. Actually, this is not needed. Fine. Okay, so this is how we create a JWT access token. So JWT, from the JSON web token, we use a sign method. We give it the user object, and here we have the JWT secret, which is specific for our server, and this again comes from the constants file. So here JWT secret process.env. So if I go to my env file, this is from where it comes from. So this will be same for all. Whenever you create an access token, this will always be the same. This is specific for your server, and if you want to create this, this can be any string in fact. So if you want to create this, just go to a new instance and just go to node, and in here we can actually import it. So require, let me see whether I've already done it here. So this is the code. Require from the crypto package random bytes 64 bits dot toString hex, and if you just press enter, you get a unique string which you can just copy and paste it right here, JWT secret, and never share this to anyone. Yeah, this should be a secret. So that's what we do. We give it that JWT secret, and for the sake of this video, because I wanted to show how to regenerate the token, I've kept the expiry to 20 seconds. So if it's prod level project, you would probably make it to 15 minutes or 20 minutes, as you see fit. So for the sake of this video, I've kept it to 20 seconds. So this returns that unique token. So right here we get the access token, it returns it, and now we set it. So we set it by actually saying rest.cookie access token. Again, this access token is basically a string. This is just this access token string. I've put in a constant because I'll be using it over and over again, and if I want to make any changes, if I change this, everything else changes together. So access token, which is a string, and what we get here, which is something just like this. Actually, I'll console log this out and show you. So access token. So now if I access token, I'll show you how this works. Console log out access token. Okay, since we're using cookies here, make sure you have this also, HTTP only true, secure true, and because both are frontend and backend is in the same endpoint like localhost, I don't have to mention the path. But if your backend is or frontend is in a different path, what you'll have to do is you'll have to mention this configuration path and put in your frontend path here, whatever it is. So because this is in a locally running, I don't have to mention that, or I could just put something like path. Yeah, if I do this also, it works because it's in the same path. Okay, so that's how we set the cookies, HTTP only, secure, path, and the same goes with the refresh token. Again, we do JWT sign user, the same thing how we generated the token, access token. We can do the same here. I could actually encapsulate this in a function, but I did not anyways. But this refresh token expires in 1 day. So once that's done, again we take the response dot cookie, we put in the refresh token. Again, this is just a string. If I go here, it's just a string. It's just a string. If I come back here and I put in that refresh token, I'll console log out the refresh token also, so that you can see this can be true, this can be true, and I can also mention the path here. So if okay, path, that works. And once that's done, I can just pass in a status code 200 JSON user logged in successfully, else throw an error. Okay, now enough of me talking. I'll just show demonstrate it to you now. Let me go back to sign. I'll sign up. I'll create a user. I'll also mention his password. I create it, nothing fancy happens here. I go here, now I sign in, and if I delete all that and log in, I should get access to this. And if I go to my Express Express terminal, here you can see we have two. This is the access token and this is the refresh token. So that's what we are setting in the cookies. Okay, I also forgot one thing, I apologize. So if I go here, if I go to my routes here, we have this getTweets, and this controller basically just gives us a dummy tweets. It's just some random tweets. I send this constant back as JSON to that user, and this is only possible if it meets if it passes this JWTAuth middleware function. So if I go here, this is a function that just checks whether in the request, if I go back here, storage, here in the request cookies we have this access token, right? So if only if this access token exists, it verifies it. So if this does not exist, we throw an error, and if it exists, this we have a JWT.verify method which actually checks whether this JWT has expired or not. So this token comes in here, JWT .verify checks whether that token is valid and is the token expired or not, and based on that we pass the user to that controller. Else we throw an error stating status 403 message verification failed. So that's what is happening here. So that's basically what the login controller does. Now for all of this to work, we need access to this cookie, and by default whenever a client is making a request, this cookie is not available. So we need to have a specific configuration in the client's request, which I'll be showing you. So under the app folder we have three different pages: dashboard, sign up, and login. So in the dashboard page, we have a tweets component. So the tweets component has this function called getTweets, right? We take in the ID and we set tweets. So if I go inside getTweets, this is a function that calls in this endpoint, and as you can see here, we have a middleware attached to it, and this middleware requires a cookie. So because it requires a cookie, we have to specify a specific configuration. So we go to, let's say, this function again, right here. We have to provide this in Axios, which is with credentials true. So if I don't give in this, I'll just comment this out, save it, go back here and say YT user, and say here YT user. If I log in, I get user not authorized, and this is because whenever you don't specify this configuration, the cookie is not attached with the request. So we have to specifically put in this configuration. Let me save it. Let me go back again, put in the same thing, YT user, and press login. Now I get the tweets. So that is a configuration that you'll have to put. And since we are already here, let me show you what is happening here. So we create a custom Axios instance with this base URL, http localhost 8080, if this process.env does not exist. And this is because now that I have this base URL attached to this custom Axios, I just have to pass in that endpoint /login instead of passing the entirety of that domain. So that's basically what is happening. So in the login function, whenever this is triggered, we get the data response, and if it's successful, we pass the user to this dashboard ID page right here, dashboard ID, and whenever the user comes to this page, this function is triggered, which gets all the tweets, which is basically just dummy tweets, and we provide this with credentials true and set the data to render it in the front end right here, and it works. So we get the response. So now since we are here, I'll clear this. Now if I refresh, because 20 seconds has passed and our token has already expired, if I refresh it now, it should automatically regenerate it for me, generate token. So let's talk about this now. So if I go back here, go back to my routes here, I have this endpoint called generate token, which has this token controller. Let's go into that token controller. So we get the refresh token, which was set in the cookies. If you remember, in the login controller right here, we've already set it in here with the refresh, this string right here, refresh token. We've already attached it here. So in here you can see we are picking this refresh token again from the cookies. So if I go back here, go to storage, cookies. So we are basically picking this up from the cookies refresh token, and we are checking it. So if it does not exist, we throw an error, verification error. But if it does exist, we verify it whether this JWT token is valid or not. So say if it's not valid, we throw an error, or if it's expired, we throw the same error. So now if it passes this condition, what we do is we again create a new token. So as you can see here, const access token, generate access token, which is similar to how we did it in the login controller right here. It's the same thing. So we take this function generate access token, we give it this user object. So if I step into that, it's the same thing again. We come back, we have this access token, we attach that access token again to the cookie, and we provide that credentials. Again, if your front end is in a different domain, you just have to mention it here, right? And we send a response of status of 200 saying token refreshed successfully, right? So this is basically it. And again, since we're using cookies in the routes of, if I go to APIs, this is our front end. So in our front end, generate refresh token. Okay, so this is again hitting to that route, generate token right here, the same thing. And because in that endpoint we need access to the cookie, again we have to provide this with credentials true. With this, the cookie is attached to the response. So as I showed you earlier, all the token is generated automatically without without the user getting redirected to a different page or having to press any button. Now that is because Axios has this configuration. So this is the configuration for that. So we have an interceptor which basically checks what happens after each response. So if a response is successful, we just return the response and just neglect whatever is happening here. But if there is an error, what happens is we have this async function error. We get all the configuration with the and we put it into this object original request. We check specifically for the response.status is equal to 403, because if I go to my route and go to this JWTAuth middleware, you can see here if that verification token does not throws an error, basically if it's wrong or if it's expired, I throw in this status 403. So I check for that specific response, I mean status 403, and this original request dot retry, which is basically false. If only if these two condition is passed, we do this right here. We say original request dot retry true, so it will retry the request. And here, so now we fire that function generate refresh token, which fires this function right here, and that attaches all the cookies which is needed, not all, basically the access token, and we return the custom Axios with the original request configurations. That's basically it. That's how we are able to generate a new token in one smooth manner. So if I refresh it, it should regenerate it again. Yeah, so that is the configuration which is done with Axios. I believe that this cannot be done with the traditional fetch method. Okay, so that's how JWT works with cookies. Now, as I stated at the start of this video, I had two methods. This was the first method using cookies. The other method, I'll show it to you right now. So now I'm in my main feature branch. So let me just collapse everything down. Let's go to my Express backend. So everything still remains the same, but in the login controller, what I'm doing is, which I've seen done in a lot of different videos. See, it's the same thing. We create the access token and we create the refresh token, and we send it as JSON to the front end. Now in the front end, if I go to my Next.js, let's go to APIs, where all my APIs for the next front end is. So in here, what is happening in the login function is we are actually setting it in the local storage itself. You can see access token. Again, this is just a string. If I go here, it's just a string access token, and I'm setting that access token. Same with the refresh token, and I'm also mentioning the expiry date. And from what I've read, this is not the most secure way of doing it. Generally it is preferred to do it in the cookies itself, but this is what is being done by, from what I've seen from most videos, this is what is being done. And the other thing which I'm doing right here is with this thing. So in the first method we had this thing. Okay, let me actually go here. So custom access, which we had created, we in the intercept for the request we set the token. We get it from this function, so get token from local storage. So in here we get that token which is set in the local storage. We get it, put it in token, and we return it. So once we return it, we put it as authorization in the headers itself, and we return it. So now if I go to my JWT, if I go to my middleware right here, so instead of taking it from the cookies, we are picking the same thing from the headers. We check whether that token is there. If it's not there, we throw the error. Again, the same drill. So we verify the token. If it passes, we send a user to the controller. So that's one thing which was changed, and the other one is this thing. So for the response, so again we hit this generate refresh token, so this function right here, and this function, if I go here, token controller. So before, what we were doing is, in the response itself we were setting the cookies, but in here what I'm doing is we generate the access token and returning it as JSON. So now we have access to it, we return the data. So if I go on top right here, yeah, so this response has the access token, we get the access token, we again set it in the local storage, and we set the authorization as well, and we return it. So this is basically the same thing. These are the only two changes which was made from the first method, and yeah, that's it, and everything should work seamlessly. That covers about everything which I wanted to share with all of you. So if I was not clear in certain portion of the video, do let me know in the comment section below. I'll try to elaborate on it, and like always, thanks for watching. See you all in the next video.